On to chapter 4, talking about infection. We're going to start out talking about basically the basics of infection. So, when something gets past your immune system, then you have an infection. So, the learning objectives for this 4 lectures, basic terminology associated with infection, microorganisms that cause infection, explaining the principles of infection, including transmission, host resistance, pathogenesis, and control of infection. We're going to talk about some selected types of infections and what the onset is like, signs and symptoms, diagnostic tests, precautions. We're going to talk about antibiotic resistant organisms. They're not friendly, and basic diagnosis and medical management of infectious conditions. So, what is infection? We talked about inflammation. Infection can cause inflammation, but other things can cause inflammation too. So, infection and inflammation might be related, but they're not the same thing. Infection is where cells of the body are invaded by pathogenic organisms. Pathogenic organisms include bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, and other nasty little things that we'll talk about a couple of them. So, outcomes can be relatively benign to life-threatening. Viruses, well, we'll talk about them. We'll talk about all of these guys. So the infection can cause inflammation, but you can have inflammation in the absence of pathogenic organisms, and so they're different. They're different things. Opportunistic infections. So we have we live in this interesting symbiotic relationship with different little bacteria. Some of the bacteria in our body are our normal flora, we call them. They live in our body and they do a good job for us. One of the jobs they do for us is they take up space so other pathogens cannot get into the system. So in our respiratory system, our upper respiratory system, we have normal flora that take up space so other pathogens can't get in. In our lower respiratory system, we do not have any normal flora. It's sterile. And if normal flora get in there, that causes a disease. So most of our openings of our body have populations of normal flora. We also have normal flora in our intestines that some people call your microbiome. And they do a lot of things for us. So we can't live without them. It's one of those things, can't live with them, can't live without them. But the normal flora are important to us. But here's the thing, our immune system keeps them in check most of the time. But when our immune system is compromised by stress, poor nutrition, sleep deprivation, that's my thing lately, fatigue, certain medications like steroid medications or other ones that we've talked about, immunosuppressant medications, or other infections or conditions, our normal flora microorganisms can get places where they're not supposed to be and cause disease. And those are called opportunistic infections. So the normal flora, they're our buddies, they're doing stuff for us, but you got to watch them every second or they'll get out of hand. So opportunistic infections are pathogens that are normally present in our system and they just get someplace where they're not supposed to be, or immunity is compromised and they cause problems. So we need to know about infection because we need to know the common causes of infection. We need to know how infection is transmitted, how to prevent infection from being transmitted, and how it's treated. So we encounter infectious agents regularly in PT practice, whether it doesn't matter what setting you work in. In fact, we encounter infectious agents regularly in the world, but they're just more concentrated in healthcare settings. Fun, right? So there is this little concept that we call the chain of infection, and breaking the chain at any point controls the spread of disease. So there are 6 essential links to the chain of infection. You start out with an infectious agent. If you don't have that, then none of the rest of it exists. So an infectious agent is a pathogen that's capable of causing infection. And then we have a reservoir. A reservoir is someplace where the pathogen survives inside a person, on an animal, in food or water, um, on an inanimate object, sometimes is the reservoir. So we have, for opportunistic pathogens, we have our normal flora, and that's our reservoir. So nice, right? And it's out there in the community. You just walk around and get bacteria on the bottom of your shoes. The portal of exit is how the pathogen leaves the reservoir. So, if the reservoir is a person, a lot of times the pathogen is exiting through their respiratory system or their digestive system. It's getting out. The mode of transmission is how the pathogen travels to the next person. And the portal of entry is how the pathogen enters the new host. And if the pathogen enters the new host and the new host's immune system is strong and then the immune system stops it right there. But if the host is susceptible, then they're another link in the chain and they become a reservoir. So it's a chain. But any place, so when you look at this diagram, it tells you kind of what things can break the links in the chain. And one of the most important things that you can do is wash your hands. I'm going to keep talking about that. I'm going to say it every day, and I'm going to do it every day, many, many times. So, our in our chain of infection, our first step in the chain of infection is an infectious agent. So that's going to be bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, prions, sometimes we'll talk about them. And each type has different characteristics, different preferred transmission methods, different treatment approaches. So if you have a bacterial infection, a lot of times it's going to be treated with antibiotics. Do antibiotics kill viruses? They do not. So that's not going to help. So you have to have a different treatment approach for different type of pathogen. So the in the next step in the chain of infection, you have a reservoir. So that's where the pathogens survive and multiply. Human reservoirs include infected individuals. So I have a cold, I'm a reservoir for the cold virus. Carriers are people that are carrying the pathogen, but they're asymptomatic. They're not actually sick, but they can make you sick. Non-human reservoirs are animals, insects, food, water, environmental surfaces. The world is full of reservoirs. Now you need a portal of exit. Common portals in humans, saliva, as being projected by the individual in the photo. Mucus, blood, feces, urine, semen, vaginal fluid, vomit. Oh, we're going to talk more about vomit. There comes a time in every pathology class when you have to talk about pus and vomit. So, the clinical significance of knowing the portal of exit is you have to understand exit routes, and that helps with precautions. So, what could we do to keep this guy from spewing droplets in his saliva from a sneeze? Um, you could toss a mask on him. You could have him sneeze into his elbow. Cover your mouth with a tissue. Anything to prevent those droplets from heading out into the world. So think about your portal of exit and how can you make a barrier to the portal of exit. Now we need a mode of transmission. So every pathogen has its preferred mode of transmission. Some of them is direct skin to skin contact or contact with body fluids or handling contaminated objects. Droplet transmission is coughing, sneezing, talking. It's the large respiratory droplets that we saw on the last slide. Airborne or aerosol transmission is small particles that remain suspended in the air longer than droplets do. So a droplet, like I sneeze and a little saliva droplet goes out 5 or 6 feet and then drops to the ground, basically. Um, Airborne aerosol particles, they're small and they can kind of float around and remain suspended and travel longer distances than droplets because they're not heavy, they don't drop to the ground as quickly. So now we have our mode of transmission. Now we need a portal of entry. So common entry points are the eyes. So you encounter a pathogen with your hands and then you scratch your eye. There it goes. Somebody sneezes in your face. and it goes right in your eyes, nose, and mouth. Any breaks in your skin are potential portals of entry. Your mucous membranes or breaks in your mucous membranes, and protecting entry points is crucial. So keeping your skin intact is pretty important. Not touching your eyes, nose, and mouth is pretty important. Um, Protecting your eyes, nose, and mouth. So those can close the portal of entry. Susceptible host. So high risk populations include very young children because they have underdeveloped immune systems, elderly adults because their immune system has started to diminish, immunocompromised individuals, obvious reasons, people with chronic conditions, malnourished or obese individuals are more susceptible. Post-transplant patients because they have to be on immunosuppressive drugs. People with open wounds or burns because their first line of defense, their skin is broken. Um, People taking immunosuppressive medications like the organ transplant people or people with rheumatoid arthritis or that sort of thing. They are the more susceptible host. So to break the chain of infection, there are strategies at each link that you can use to break this chain of infection. What is the most important thing that you personally can do to break the chain of infection? Wash your hands on a regular basis. I have one of those little bottles of hand sanitizer that has a loop on it, and I have it on the end of my purse. And so every time I go someplace, I have that hand sanitizer with me. I'm a nut about it. I'll just tell you that. So the strategies for each link, if you are able to identify the infection agent early and treat it appropriately, then you're going to spread less. If you are a reservoir, like you're currently sick, isolating, decontaminating, and public health measures like if you do, like stay home from work. If you don't stay home from work, wear a mask when you go to work, if it's that type of thing. Isolate the reservoir. The portal of exit or transmission and portal of entry, hand hygiene, PPE, environmental cleaning, hand hygiene. It's important. To keep you from being susceptible, vaccination, healthy lifestyle, eat, sleep, and exercise well, and infection control. So those are all things that can break the chain of infection.